Alexander Sterling adjusted the gray wig and fake mustache one last time, his hands trembling as he watched the black limousines pull up to St. Matthew's Cathedral. In 20 minutes, he would witness his own funeral, an elaborate charade orchestrated after his doctor's devastating diagnosis gave him 6 months to live. But as he sat in the back pew disguised as an elderly mourner, watching his family and friends file into the ornate cathedral, Alexander was about to discover a truth more painful than any terminal illness. Most of the people in his life were already counting his money before his body was even cold. Have you ever wondered who would really mourn you if you were gone tomorrow? Drop a broken heart if you believe the people who truly love us are often the ones we least expect. 3 weeks earlier, Alexander had been the ruthless CEO of Sterling Industries, a $12 billion empire built on real estate, technology, and strategic acquisitions. At 62, he commanded boardrooms, influenced politicians, and lived in a Manhattan penthouse that cost more than most people's lifetime earnings. He had everything money could buy, except the one thing he'd just learned he was running out of: time. Pancreatic cancer, Dr. Morrison had said, his voice gentle but clinical. Stage 4. I'm sorry, Alexander, but you have perhaps 6 months, maybe less. The diagnosis had hit Alexander like a physical blow, but what came next surprised him even more. Instead of fear, he felt curious. Curious about what his death would mean to the people in his life. Curious about who would genuinely grieve and who would simply be positioning themselves for the inheritance battle. So Alexander had done something unprecedented. He'd faked his own death. It had taken careful planning and substantial bribes. His longtime assistant, Margaret, one of the few people he truly trusted, had helped orchestrate the deception. A staged car accident, a body that was supposedly too damaged for viewing, cremation papers signed by paid-off officials. To the world, Alexander Sterling had died in a fiery crash on a remote mountain road. Now, wearing the disguise of a frail old man with a cane, Alexander watched his own funeral unfold from the back of the cathedral where he'd been baptized 70 years ago. The turnout was impressive. Over 500 people filled the Gothic space. Business leaders, politicians, socialites, all dressed in expensive black, their faces appropriately somber. At the front, his family sat in the first pew. His ex-wife, Victoria, their 2 children, Marcus and Sophia, his brother Richard, and various cousins and in-laws. But as the service began, Alexander's heart began to break in ways the cancer never could. Victoria, his ex-wife of 10 years, was checking her phone during the opening prayer. She'd divorced him, claiming he cared more about money than marriage, which had been true, but now she sat stone-faced, probably calculating her share of the estate. Their prenup had been generous. She'd already received $50 million in the divorce, but Alexander knew she expected more from his will. Marcus, his 35-year-old son, was whispering to his wife about vacation plans. Alexander caught fragments. As soon as probate clears, and that house in the Hamptons will be perfect for... Marcus had never worked a day in his life, living off his trust fund and waiting for the real inheritance. He'd visited his father exactly twice in the past 2 years, both times to ask for money. Sophia, his 28-year-old daughter, was openly texting during the eulogy. She'd been angry with Alexander for years, blaming him for her struggles with addiction and her failed relationships. Every conversation they'd had in the past decade had ended with her asking for money and him trying to offer help she didn't want. Brother Richard stood to give the main eulogy, and Alexander leaned forward to hear what his only sibling would say about their relationship. Alexander Sterling was a titan of industry, Richard began, his voice carrying easily through the cathedral. He built an empire that employed thousands and generated billions in economic value. His legacy will live on through Sterling Industries and the charitable foundation that bears our family name. Alexander waited for something personal, some memory of their childhood, some acknowledgement of the man behind the money. Instead, Richard continued with corporate speak about market leadership and philanthropic initiatives. Not once did he mention Alexander as a father, a brother, or a human being. The eulogy could have been delivered by any business reporter who'd Googled his biography. As Richard spoke, Alexander noticed movement in the side aisles. Several of his business associates were checking their watches, probably calculating how quickly they could get to the reception and start networking. 2 board members were actually passing notes, likely strategizing about the power vacuum his death would create. But it was what happened during the sharing memories portion that truly broke Alexander's heart. One by one, people stood to speak about Alexander Sterling, the businessman, the philanthropist, the force of nature. But no one, not one person, shared a story that revealed who he was as a human being. No funny anecdotes, no moments of kindness, no memories of friendship or love. Because, Alexander realized with growing horror, he hadn't given them any. He'd been so focused on building wealth and power that he'd forgotten to build relationships. His children knew him as a source of money and disappointment. His ex-wife knew him as a workaholic who'd chosen business over family. His colleagues knew him as a brilliant but ruthless negotiator. No one in that cathedral was mourning Alexander the Man because Alexander the Man had disappeared somewhere along the way to building his empire. Then something unexpected happened. A small, elderly woman made her way slowly to the podium. Alexander recognized her immediately, Mrs. Rosa Martinez, who'd cleaned his office building for 15 years. What was she doing here? "Excuse me," Rosa said softly, her voice barely audible over the cathedral's sound system. "I know I don't belong here with all you important people, but I wanted to say something about Mr. Sterling." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Several people checked their phones. Victoria rolled her eyes. 15 years I cleaned his office," Rosa continued, her voice gaining strength. "Every night I would see him there, working so late. And every night he would ask about my grandson Diego, who was sick with leukemia." Alexander felt his breath catch. He remembered Diego, a bright 8-year-old who'd been fighting cancer. When Diego needed that expensive treatment, Mr. Sterling didn't just write a check. He called the hospital himself, talked to the doctors, made sure Diego got the best care. He visited Diego in the hospital, brought him books, sat with him when I had to work. The cathedral had gone completely quiet. Alexander saw his family members looking confused, as if Rosa was talking about a stranger. "Diego is 17 now, healthy and strong. Because Mr. Sterling cared about a cleaning lady's grandson. He told me never to tell anyone, said it was private. But now that he's gone—" Rosa wiped tears from her eyes. "I wanted you to know that he had a good heart, even if he didn't show it very often." Alexander was crying behind his fake mustache, remembering those quiet evenings in the children's hospital, reading to a scared little boy while his grandmother worked nights to pay the bills. Rosa wasn't finished, and there was Mrs. Patterson, the security guard's wife who needed surgery, and Jimmy, the mailroom boy who couldn't afford college, and so many others. Mr. Sterling helped them all, but he swore us to secrecy, said he didn't want people thinking he was soft. As Rosa made her way back to her seat, Alexander noticed other people he hadn't seen before scattered throughout the cathedral. The security guard, looking uncomfortable in an ill-fitting suit. Several young people who must have been scholarship recipients. Families he'd helped quietly over the years. They were the only ones crying. His family, his business associates, his supposed friends. They sat dry-eyed, probably annoyed that some cleaning lady had interrupted the formal proceedings. After the service, Alexander followed the crowd to the reception at his exclusive country club. He watched from a corner as his family immediately huddled with lawyers, discussing the will reading scheduled for the next day. He listened to business associates networking over canapes, already maneuvering for positions in the post-Alexander power structure. But in another corner, he saw Rosa and the security guard and several other working-class people who'd somehow scraped together the money for funeral attire. They were sharing stories, real stories, about times Alexander had shown kindness when no one was watching. "He came to my daughter's quinceañera," the security guard was saying. Didn't announce himself, just showed up with a gift and stayed for the whole party, danced with my wife, played with the kids. I'd never seen him smile like that. Alexander remembered that night, one of the happiest evenings he'd had in years, surrounded by genuine warmth and celebration instead of corporate networking. As the reception wound down, Alexander made a decision that would shock everyone who thought they knew him. The next day, at the will reading in his lawyer's office, the assembled family and associates got the surprise of their lives when Alexander Sterling walked into the room, very much alive. The chaos was immediate. Victoria screamed. Marcus dropped his coffee. Sophia started crying, not from joy, but from apparent disappointment. "Before anyone asks," Alexander said calmly, taking his seat at the head of the conference table, "yes, I faked my death. Yes, I have cancer, and yes, I attended my own funeral yesterday." The lawyer, who was in on the deception, remained professionally neutral as Alexander's family erupted in outrage. "This is sick, Dad," Marcus shouted. "What kind of person fakes their own death?" "The kind of person who wants to know who really loves them," Alexander replied quietly. "And now I know." He looked around the table at their angry, entitled faces. "I have 6 months to live. I spent yesterday watching people I thought cared about me demonstrate that they don't. My own son was planning vacation houses during my eulogy. My daughter couldn't be bothered to put down her phone. My ex-wife was calculating her inheritance during the opening prayer." "Alexander, this is outrageous," Victoria began. "What's outrageous?" Alexander interrupted. "Is that the only people who genuinely mourned my death were the ones I helped quietly, the ones who knew me as something other than a bank account with legs." He slid a document across the table. "This is my real will. The Sterling fortune, all $12 billion of it, will be placed in a charitable trust managed by people who actually give a damn about helping others. Each family member will receive $1 million, enough to live comfortably if you're smart with it, but not enough to live without working." The outrage was immediate and predictable. Threats of lawsuits, accusations of mental incompetence, demands that he reconsider. Alexander stood up slowly, suddenly feeling every one of his 62 years. "I spent my life building wealth and neglecting relationships. I have 6 months left, and I intend to spend them with people who care about me as a human being, not as a source of money." He walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and if anyone wants to contest the will, feel free. I've had the best lawyers in the country make it bulletproof. The money goes to charity no matter what you do." 3 months later, Alexander sat in Rosa's small living room, playing chess with her grandson Diego. The young man was now a senior in high school, planning to study medicine, a dream made possible by the scholarship fund Alexander had quietly established years earlier. Alexander's penthouse sat empty while he spent his remaining time in places filled with genuine warmth. Rosa's family dinners, the community center where his scholarship recipients volunteered, the children's hospital where he'd started reading to patients every Tuesday. His family had initially boycotted him, furious about the changed will. But slowly, some of them began to visit, not to ask for money, but to actually get to know him. Sophia, surprisingly, had been the first to come around, admitting that her anger had always been about feeling like he'd never really seen her as more than a disappointment. Marcus took longer, but eventually started bringing his children to visit their grandfather, something he'd rarely done when he thought there was a fortune to inherit. Alexander's cancer progressed as predicted, but his final months were the richest of his life. He died peacefully in his sleep at Rosa's house, surrounded by people who loved him for his kindness, not his bank balance. His real funeral was smaller, maybe 50 people in a simple church, but every person there shared genuine memories of love, laughter, and moments of connection that had nothing to do with money. The eulogy was given by Diego, now 18, and headed to pre-med studies. "Mr. Alexander taught me that true wealth isn't what you accumulate," the young man said, his voice strong and clear. "It's what you give away, and how you make people feel valued and loved." In the end, Alexander Sterling learned the most important lesson of his life in his final months. The only inheritance that matters is the love you leave behind, and the only mourners who count are the ones who cry for the person you were, not the possessions you had, because sometimes we have to lose everything to discover what really matters. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones we've been overlooking. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the chance to see who we really are when the money doesn't matter anymore.